hasn't come on our show. Whatever he says about it, he's ducked it.
Some of it was getting a little bit personal, and maybe because certain people were getting put into a corner.
And they didn't include the idea that any failed drug tests under this testing regime would be a problem. It makes no sense. Welcome to Talk Boxing with Simon Jordan and Spencer Oliver. It's episode 17. There's a heavy feeling in the room. Pat's back. Don't forget to keep liking the videos, keep subscribing to the channel, but let's get on with this week's show. Spence, you look like a cross between Tutu at Fantasy Island and the Milk Train Man.
Why did we start on a bad note?
Set the tone.
I thought this sort of enhances my eye colour, no?
Turtleneck. A turtleneck. Been hanging around with that Jim White too much.
Anyway, Simon, yes, I'm
Everything
great.
right?
Thank you. Yeah, really good. Yourself?
Nice to see you. Not bad, not bad.
Good.
Had an interesting morning. We had Eddie Hearn come in for the much lauded discussion. A lot's been made out of it about the nature of my relationship with Eddie and what people perceive to be a toing and froing. Really wasn't from my side. It was more about trying to get Eddie into a situation where he actually answered questions, then those questions were interrogated. I wasn't surprised he came in because I know that DAZN approached us, wanted us to do it as a standalone, which I wasn't interested in doing because I don't think Eddie's that important. I thought we should be folding him into our show and giving the benefit of our viewing figures.
I got asked to come on the talkSPORT morning show. I got asked to come on this show. I didn't like what he said. I took it personal, probably a little bit of ego, and I wanted to give him a slap.
In your talkSPORT boxing show with Spencer, you called Eddie a coward.
Yep.
It wasn't a comment that went down too well with Eddie and his people. Why did you make that observation?
Because he was a coward. Not a coward in character, but a coward in his behaviour. There's a vast difference between the two, and I've qualified on a number of occasions. So if he wants to take offence, he should get over it. He's a big boy, apparently. And if you're a big boy and you don't like something that someone says about you, you do two things. You either issue a writ against them for defamation, or you come and debate them and put them in a place. You did neither because you couldn't, and you ducked it, and you did it with other people. But the reasons why I said it is because he's got plenty to say for himself. He is the archetypal walking, talking, singing canary when it suits him. When it comes down to a situation where there's a scenario where he needs to put forward his best foot in a situation which is shrouded in inconsistencies, misrepresentations, a load of them by him, he should have done a damn sight better than do a press conference saying, I'm not going to say anything. Were you surprised that he chose to come in?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't surprised at all, actually. I think, Eddie's very smart and he recognises that it's a huge platform and it was the best place to do it. It was always, I think that it was an interview that needed doing. I think I didn't really get the answers, to be fair, that I wanted to hear, but we'll get into that in a bit. But I thought it was an interview that needed doing. I think that it'd been brewing for a while, and it didn't surprise me at all that he'd come in. Great radio, by the way. Great radio.
Yeah, I think it had its moments. I was a little disappointed because I thought sometimes I talked over him and I didn't need to, but it's because I was not wanting to listen to some of the things that he was saying because I knew they were going in a direction that weren't in the right direction, not because I should control the flow, but I'm looking at the time thinking he's going to wind this clock down, we're going to get no insight into this, and I didn't think that what he was saying had a lot of substance. But I think he is, without a doubt, whether you like him or loathe him, I think he is, in this industry, which I think does need to sophisticate itself, he is a blue chip promoter. He hasn't come on our show. Whatever he says about it, he has ducked it.
Yeah.
And the reasons why he's ducked it is because the other boys and girls have asked questions. They have asked the questions. But it's not about asking the questions. It's about then what you do with the answers.
Yeah.
And then how far you push it back. I don't suppose anyone said to Eddie during the course of an interview, I think you should be sanctioned. I think you are a co-conspirator in an outcome that's, at this moment in time, not particularly satisfactory. But listen, he's a strong character. Whether I think he's inherited his dad's business or whatever, he's taken it to another level. Yeah. Whether I think that some of the things he does are snake oil salesman-y, where he's baiting and switching and not ever answering a question and telling you something's there when it's really over there, I still think that he's a leading promoter, undoubtedly, one of the biggest promoters in the world. I still think some of the things he says, and when he presents himself, he's like P.T. Barnum. I think he's got charisma abounding. And so I'm not surprised he came in. He will feel and like to represent it that it was on his terms. It most certainly was not. DAZN asked us to do something, and we gave him an opportunity to do it. But I hope, if anything, people did get to hear a little bit more than they've held elsewhere, because I've made a lot of noise about grown-up questions.
He was asking him the questions, but also asking him a question off his answers. I think that was very important, because like you say, when he comes on and he's been on the breakfast show and a few or whatever, you know, they've got the questions lined out to ask him, and they're not asking questions off the back of that. And I think that's maybe why he was putting off coming on the show with you, because you want to get to the bottom, you want to get to the answers, Simon, basically. And I mean, a lot of it was...
I got no agenda. I got no dog in the fight. I don't like Frank more than I like Eddie. I don't like Eddie more than I like Ben. I don't like Ben more than I like Eddie.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the dynamics of some of the people that work in his organisation, they're a little bit disrespectful, and they should wind their necks in, because they I've forgotten more than they'll ever know about life and business and money. But notwithstanding it, you put yourself in the way in these conversations. And of course, the conversation and the subject matter was dominated for a large proportion of the interview, the discussion about Conor Benn, and Chris Eubank Jr. Did you feel that we learnt anything? Because the object of the aim isn't to score points off one another. The object of the aim was to get insight.
Yeah.
The object. A lot of people want Eddie Hearn put in his place. A lot of people want Eddie Hearn uncomfortable. I'm interested in all that. So what I wanted was Eddie Hearn to answer questions. I wanted Eddie Hearn to own some of the things that I think are the real realities behind this situation.
Yeah.
Did you, when you were listening to it, because it's one thing being involved in it, and Jim's trying to arbitrate and keep it flowing and looking at the breaks and whatever else, I'm thinking, right, all I'm interested in you, Eddie, is accounting for what you've just said, mate. Right? You're listening in the gallery. Did you think that you heard anything different or learnt anything more about this Conor? Because I think it's such a big thing. There's so much going on in this sport that needs to be attended to.
Yeah.
And drug situations are right at the top of the queue. Did you think you learnt or heard anything different from Eddie, or gained any more insights about the whole scenario?
No, and I think that was the disappointment for me. I mean, I don't know if you felt any different, but for me, just sitting out there listening to it, and I come in early because I wanted to listen to it all unfold. Some of it was getting a little bit personal, and maybe because certain people were getting put into a corner. But the Conor Benn situation, we didn't learn anything. The most important question you asked him, which everybody wants to know, we've heard everything else about it, and we've heard Conor's side of things, we've heard Eddie Hearn, and everyone, you know, Conor feels that it's everyone else's fault, and you know, he's blaming everyone but himself. You know, Eddie believes Conor Benn in what he's saying.
It would have been so easy for me just to cast him aside and say, well, you know, I'm not sure about. I believe the young man. And I've stood
Do you
by
believe him still?
100%.
Still?
100%. I've sat with him. I've sat with his family. And by the way, no one can criticise me for that. Because let me tell you, it would have been so easy.
But you
wait,
hang on,
wait,
Simon.
Just
hang
wait.
on.
You're the only person who loves the sound of his own voice more than me.
I don't know about that.
Well, it's true. But what I'm saying, Simon, is I've chosen to back this young man. I've taken flack. I've taken criticism. People have told me, don't do it. Distance yourself from it.
Is that because you can't get out of it now?
No. Mate, it would be easy for me to get out of it. I've done it because I believe in Jim.
The facts are the facts. He's failed 2 tests. You asked Eddie, you put it on there and said, why have you not gone to the British Boxing Board of Control? Forget about the WBC, because they're irrelevant. They don't matter. The WBC have just looked at it and gone, oh, let's put him back into the rankings. And that allows him to fight, and he'll fight somewhere else in the world. But to fight in this country, and Eddie said on the show, he wants him to...
He said he regretted his actions.
He regretted.
He hasn't said that previously.
No, he did. He said he regretted his actions, and that's fair enough. He held his hands up to that. He said he's not really had much involvement. It's interesting as well, saying about Conor making the decisions to go on Piers Morgan. Bad decision, by the way. Didn't do himself any favours.
But would he, though? But in fairness, I mean, I think that someone like him should be the leading light that has the biggest influence. But he's not Conor Benn's manager, is he?
No.
He's his promoter. So his job is to lead him to water, which is the fight.
But Eddie's very, Eddie's a smart guy.
Yeah, he is.
And I think that had he listened to Eddie's advice on certain things, he may have not made the decisions that he made. I think that some of the decisions that Conor's made in the build-up to this, and the advice he's been given, have not been good.
It's been poor.
It's been very, very poor. I mean, just to get onto the British Boxing Board of Control situation, where we're at right now with this whole Conor Benn situation, and everyone's getting bored and tired of talking about it, and you asked him this question, you said, look, why does he just not present his 270-page document to the British Boxing Board of Control and clear it up? And we never got the answers again. He went around the houses about it again. And for me, I think that's a little bit poor, because I think that gives us the answer on why he's not presented the 270-page document, because...
Possibly.
Yeah.
Because I think the main structure is ultimately strict liability. The strict liability clause that catches him in a real sort of bugger's muddle in terms of ultimately in your system 4-year ban, in your system with no intent, 2-year ban. No ban if you can actually prove that there was some malevolent influence that put it in your system that you had no knowledge of. And that's a bugger's muddle for him to achieve. What I think that we learned was that Eddie's very adept and very adroit at expecting people not to know what they're talking about. And I think there was an assumption and expectation on his side, and people may concur with it, they may still think that that's the case, that I was a blowhard that didn't know what he was talking about, and I was going to have a little dance made in front of me about the reality of how it was all held together.
You're getting very personal with each other off here, I've got to say.
Not really.
In
not
here.
Personal. I mean, I don't agree with a lot of what he's saying.
No, but
ultimately,
he's saying silly things, right? What he believes is that if someone puts him on the spot and asks a pointed question and doesn't let it go, and then dissects his answer and disseminates the information, that's somehow controversial.
No, what I said to you was, you've got 3 or 4 things factually incorrect, which you completely failed to acknowledge.
I don't
because in your world, you run boxing, you are the governing body.
No.
You are the British Boxing Board of Control.
Not at all. That's
I work in this sport every single day. I wouldn't come to you and say, ultimately, this is how mobile phones work, or this is how Crystal Palace works. That's your field.
Absolutely.
My field is I do this every single day.
You're
coming out with facts that you think
common sense involved in all businesses, Eddie. I know.
Common sense when it's a regulatory commission.
There's common sense, and I don't agree with the assertion. I don't agree with the fact that because he's vehement about the idea that actually certain things can't happen, like the British Boxing Board of Control don't acknowledge VADA. I don't believe that to be true, because I believe that VADA and any private laboratory test that is in a WADA, the World Anti-Doping Association's accreditation, and a failed adverse test immediately becomes under UCAD. So for Eddie to suggest that that's not the case is disingenuous. And then we move into the territory of Eddie saying to me, I did what you'd have done. 1 minute he told me I didn't know anything. The next minute he tells me I'd have done what you would have done. You'd have done what I did, right? Or I'd have done what you would have done in this instance, which is, operate in a certain way. I said, there's 2 contracts, Eddie, isn't there? They're very simple. There's a contract with you and your fighter, and then there's a contract with Callie Sowland and Wasserman for the fight. Right? You keep on saying that you couldn't put this fight off, and that's a clever, cute argument, because ultimately Callie Sowland is the one that has to call the fight off. But in this instance, you could have stepped away from this fight because you've got a contract with a fighter that must protect you from a fighter breaching certain covenants, like, let's say, failing a drugs test. You had me believe, or you'll have me believe, and the listening public, that only comes into play if the British Boxing Board of Control or the sanctioning body, licensing body, turn around and say, we're not going to license this fight. Well, with due respect, I'm clear in my understanding that all the other promoters have got clauses in their contracts that basically don't require a boxing board of control to stop a fight
You must
happening.
have some sort of protection, surely.
As a fighter,
of that magnitude.
as a promoter, you've got a clause of a fighter that does not require a third party from stopping you from representing that fighter because they failed a drugs test. You will have me believe that you don't have that, albeit I know that there are matchroom contracts out there that say precisely that. So for the biggest fight around, with VADA enrolment, they enrolled Conor into the voluntary but mandatory VADA testing if you're inside the WBC top 15. And they didn't include the idea that any failed drug tests under this testing regime would be a problem. It makes no sense.
So to clear this up for the viewers that may not understand the situation with the whole VADA testing, and yes, it was voluntary, but he had to sign up to the VADA testing to get put into the WBC top 15.
Correct.
Because he refused to do the VADA testing the year before, and they took him out of the rankings. So Conor Benn wanted to get back in the rankings. So the voluntary testing, really, he had to do to get back into that WBC top 15. That's where we're at with it, and that's the test that he failed. But VADA, Eddie Hearn and Conor Benn and everybody have always said that VADA is the golden testing.
Well, look at the examples. And Eddie tried to suggest to me that I didn't understand the situation around Demetrius Andrade and the scenario there, which is the Massachusetts and the WBO pulling Billy Joe Saunders on a basis of a failed VADA test. But that wasn't the same principles as a scenario in the UK where that particular substance is an out of competition permitted substance. So it didn't really have relevance. And the fact that Eddie pulled Buatsi out of the Pascal fight on the basis of VADA, on the fact that VADA was involved in a British Boxing Board of Control's decision to not sanction Dillian White as a result of the failed drugs test before the Rivas fight.
Yeah.
And then you move on to the vilification, the absolute vilification of Jarrell Miller that failed 3 VADA tests.
Yes.
And Eddie was calling for him to never see the light of day again. All of those things. But here was the interesting fact that we did learn. Chris Eubank never knew about the first failed drug test.
Yeah.
On the 23rd of August, when the fight was signed and announced on August the 9th, there was a 23rd of July drugs test commissioned by the Clean Boxing program as a result of the WBC top rankings that we're talking about inside the top 15. In the middle of the fight being signed, announced, prior to that, there was a test. Whilst the fight was signed, that test was still pending. On the 23rd of August, that test came back with an adverse finding. Chris Eubank was never told.
Yes.
Eddie will have you believe that that's because there's confidentiality protecting him from being told. So he goes on in his camp. He goes all the way forward now to the 23rd of September. He's now shredded. He's in fight mode. He's 15 days away from the fight, prepared.
And he's still unaware of
And he's still unaware of a failed drug test. And nobody told him. And I think that brings a vast amount of disrepute into the sport. And my argument with Eddie is that you should be sanctioned. He says it's confidentiality. He says he doesn't have those rights over a fighter. All the other promoters seem to have it. Previous matchroom contracts seem to exhibit the fact that they've got this clause where if a fighter fails a drugs test, they don't need the sanctioning body to not sanction a fight, to pull the fight off.
Sure.
So all of that, I think, was insight and made no sense. He was robust. He was strong. He wanted to tell me what I didn't know. And of course, if this is your game, and I'm a student of it, and I'm studying, and if I'm going to invest in this business or get involved in it, which is what I'm going to do, then believe me, I'm going to study it, but I'm never going to know as much as him. He's going to play that card of, hang on a second, that's not what it's called. You're not accepting what I'm telling you. I'm not accepting what you're telling you, Eddie, because I don't believe you. And I've got matchroom contracts or indications of matchroom contracts in the past that say precisely what I've just said. That was a conversation that wasn't particularly well received.
Yep.
But the bottom line is he came in, he was robust, he believes in Conor Benn. He knows the challenge he's got. It's not the WBC and their nonsense and getting involved in something that's got nothing to do with them, really. And then acting as a witness for the defence on behalf of Conor Benn. You're not the witness of the defence, you're the adjudicating panel. You're supposed to be adjudicating, not finding him an alternate solution. He knows that the British Boxing Board of Control comes with a sting in its tail, and the sting in its tail is strict liability. And for Eddie to finish the interview after all of the rambunctiousness and robustness, and both on camera and off air, to finish it with, I'm going to promote Conor Benn to fight Chris Eubank Jr. in the Middle East or America,
in June,
is, I think, nothing short of scandalous.
You want Benn to fight Eubank Jr.
Correct.
The fight we were going to see, but we didn't see because of 2 failed drug tests. You're going to fix it outside the UK.
Potentially, if we can't get it in the UK, which looks unlikely for June. But I want to start that process, and it's both of them sitting down with a blank sheet of paper and a clear head to try and find out what needs to be done to make Conor Benn fight in this country again. But I'm ready at the same time, after the WBC hearing and after him being allowed to fight in any jurisdiction, to look at opportunities and potential fights.
Will Eubank Jr. not want certain proof that Conor's clean?
Of course. He'll be the most tested fighter. I mean, don't forget, he's still in all these programs. And by the way, I say again, and people choose to ignore it, Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr. asked us to add an additional layer of testing to that fight above and beyond UCAD, which ultimately we paid for, irrelevant. But they said, we want full VADA testing. He must be full VADA tested, non-stop. He's still part of that program. He can be tested anytime. He's still openly willing to take
Okay, so we're going to see this outside the UK in June. That's what you want to try and do.
You will
Benn
see
Eubank
Conor Benn.
Jr.
That's the fight I would like. But Kell Brook, Manny Pacquiao, they're calling him out 24/7. So
Okay.
we have to look at the options.
So I don't think he's right in this situation. I think there is an immorality about promoting Conor until he clears it up. I don't think he did his job at the outset. I do think he used undue influence, but I do also respect that. I thought it was a wonderful thing he did the other day when he sat in front of the cameras and goes, who puts these fights on? Moi. I thought, there you go, P.T. Barnum. That's a showman. That's what it needs. But it also needs blue chip guys to act in a blue chip way, and he doesn't sometimes. You know, his brass neck, you've got to admire it. But what have we just talked about? Why wouldn't you have taken this kid by the hand and his dad and said, even his dad said in Piers Morgan's interview, I don't think it's right that he hasn't shown a report to the British Boxing Board of Control, and walks him in there.
That's the craziest thing, though. Look, the only thing that needs doing now is to present that document to the British Boxing Board of Control and get it cleared up. That's all it is. There's obviously not enough evidence in that document to be able to sway the boxing board or change the boxing board's minds. So he's looking at facing a ban. That's where I'm
Well,
at.
give it to them. Let them adjudicate. If it's a stinker and you think they've got preconceived or prejudged bias, then take it from there into the Court of Arbitration and Sport. Was there any parts of the conversation that, for you, disappointed you?
I think just the whole situation surrounding the Conor Benn situation with the British Boxing Board of Control, and then talking about this fight happening in June, and whether it's Chris Eubank Jr. or Manny Pacquiao, wherever it's going to be, the facts are the facts.
Do you
he
think
will
Eddie
be
should
fighting
step
in
him
June.
down? Do you think Eddie should stand him down and get him to clear his name?
Simon, I just think it just puts a grey cloud over the sport of boxing when you allow it to happen. And I personally think that Eddie should just have stepped away from that and say, look, mate, you need to present your documents to the British Boxing. You need to clear your name with the British Boxing Board of Control before we can move forward.
But he has stepped
it
away
puts
from
a
it.
stain on the sport.
He has stepped away from it a little bit, hasn't he? Because he doesn't have any...
Yeah, but he's still having a fight going on in June.
There it is. Right. But he stepped away from it in terms of, I believe in this kid. I know this kid. Tony Sims is someone I know. The kid lives with Tony Sims, trains and lives and breathes and eats and whatever else with Tony Sims. And so that Tony Sims would have known this. I know these people. I believe in this kid. Yeah. And but he's distanced himself a little bit from the fact that he's gone on Piers Morgan, that he said things. He's now saying that the British Boxing Board of Control, I should bring them together. Well, if you stop slaughtering the British Boxing Board of Control, if you stop calling Robert Smith a then might have been able to bring everybody together. Yeah, sure. And what you should have been using was the powerful influence that you've undoubtedly got in the industry to say to Conor, stop it now. You don't like the fact the British Boxing Board of Control have given you a £100,000 fine. They gave you a £100,000 fine because you refused to cooperate on the basis of an adverse finding. That's why they gave it to you. There's no preordained bias about what's happened to your father. That's all irrelevant. The same people aren't on the board. Robert Smith wasn't even there anymore. You need to be in front of these people. Yeah. But he didn't, and the thing that must have disappointed us, and I think you've alluded to it, and it's a takeaway which only could happen in boxing, which makes me sigh, because it's an industry that I'm so close to getting involved in and so focused on and enjoying it for what it is, and seeing the fact that fights can be made. I saw the fight that was made between Joseph Parker and Joe Joyce, and being involved in that fight and having two people that regularly want to wave their willies in terms of promoters, actually finding a solution. You want to find the fact that these guys can work together. And what I listened to today was all of that to one side. I'm still going to promote Conor Benn. I'm still not going to make him understand that the best way to get this solved is to get you in front of the beak, have that guy judge you. If that guy doesn't do it fairly, then ram you into Court of Arbitration and Sport and make people accountable.
Absolutely.
He went on to talk about the DAZN situation and what's going on that platform, and the rumbling arguments and the sort of sniping going back and forwards about Josh Buatsi, about Lawrence Okoli, more so Josh Buatsi, because Josh came on and spoke to us the other day on a different show that we do, and has done the media rounds talking about the desire not to be behind a paywall or a login on a VOD platform for DAZN. I don't go with that because Netflix is the biggest model in the world, and people could still get used to using that. But we spoke about Buatsi and Okoli and DAZN. What did you think about Eddie's answer? Because I thought it dug out Buatsi. I thought Josh spent too much time talking about the platform because I think that's all nonsense.
You know what?
Get on with fights. But he was very critical of Josh, that the fact that he didn't want to have a certain amount of fights, that he had invested a lot of money in him and he hadn't recovered that money. So it was well within his rights to say to Josh, you should stay longer after I've made you the Bivol fight. What do you make of that?
I totally understand that. I totally get that from Eddie Hearn's point of view, from the business side of things. I think Eddie's right in what he says there. You know, he has invested a lot of money in Joshua Buatsi. Yeah. He's got him to that level, and he's saying, "Listen, I'm going to give you.
Whose job is it to market him?
Oh no, I'm going to give you the Bivol fight. I'm going to give you 1.25 million, which is a lot of money as well as a challenger. You're going to get that fight, but we want to tie you in." And I thought it was over 3 years, but he said actually 3 fights. Yeah. So I thought, well, listen, that's fair enough. Like, you know,
but that's going to be 2 years.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
It's going to be 18 months.
Really, it's like depending on what route they take.
Well, if he's world title holder, it's going to be 18 months.
Yeah, because they've got the rematch clause in there as well, and etc.
Which is fair enough.
But look, come on, Simon. I think that, you know, Eddie's, like I say, he has invested a lot of money. He deserves to get a little bit of something back there. And I agree. Buatsi's argument was, well, I don't want to be a world champion on an app. Basically, I want to grow outside of that, and obviously Sky TV is the place to be. And I understand that side of it as well.
We're very similar in many ways, me and you. some ways. But from a business sense,
I'll let you have that
let me
one.
put this to you.
Go ahead.
Joshua Buatsi, from the professional debut, is a matchroom fighter. Invested in him his whole career, right? And it's a significant investment across purses.
Are you ahead
home.
yet?
Are you going to let? No, absolutely
You're
miles behind. Miles behind on Joshua Buatsi. Miles behind. See, the ticket sales for the Craig Richards fight, that was a good example. And I've seen the viewing figures versus other fighters. That's why we have to make commercial decisions. Going back to that, we get him a British title fight. He gets a European title fight, right? We box him at Madison Square Garden. We get him to number 1 in the world somehow, because that's our job. And we walk him in to a £1.25 million fight with Dimitri Bivol for the world title.
Which he acknowledges.
In neutral territory.
Which he acknowledges.
Okay. Now, his contract's up. Number 1, Dimitri Bivol has to have a rematch clause, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have to extend that contract anyway.
Fair enough.
We ask for a 3-fight extension if he was to go on and win the world title for a huge amount of money, probably walk into the Canelo Alvarez fight for $7 million like Callum Smith and Billy Joe Saunders did. That's complete industry standard. You've made a huge investment.
And you've got
given him a
matching
huge
rights and all
payday.
that goes with it.
Yeah,
I understand all that.
That's the situation.
From Buatsi's point of view, it's not the fact that he's WBA number 1 now, but I just think that he feels that he's never been the number 1 like heavyweight.
But it's interesting that Eddie was prepared to say that he doesn't think, and neither did Virgil Hunter, that Buatsi could beat Bivol.
Yeah.
He didn't say that in the interview today with us. He said it to one of the IFL mob, I think.
Yeah.
And said, you know, because the argument was, and what I said to him in the debate that we had was, you're quite facetious. You know, everyone speculates to accumulate, right? It's the way it happens. I bought enough players that I invested in, and the moment it got well for them, and they suddenly left me in the lurch and didn't do their bit, and we all get on with it.
Yeah.
You haven't got to sit there, you know, sort of pissing on their parade. But his attitude was, I spent a lot of money invested in him. I made him a fight. The things that are being said by him are slight misrepresentations.
Yeah.
I'm within my right. And as a commercial man, I'm going to hear this and go, yeah, I'll make you right.
Yeah.
But there was also the other side of the equation, which is these fighters are being carted over to DAZN.
Yeah.
And DAZN, whilst a lot of money behind it and serious players behind it, aren't, to me, a great content provider.
Yeah.
They aren't delivering great outcomes. They're changing their pricing model because I suspect it's not working as well for them as they want to. And I know they're wrapping pay-per-view in it and all that sort of stuff.
Well, they've got the platform now with Sky, haven't they? They've got the Sky
Joshua
channel
fight.
as well. No,
You're right.
Forward. Yeah, they've got the Sky platform, which is a big plus for DAZN, by the way, like moving forward. But then we go back to that, reverting back to that whole, you've got to pay an extra 20 quid on top of your Sky money, and you're still going to have pay-per-view fights on there. Yeah. You know, so
but I suppose what they're doing
is they're moving forward, finding the platform, Simon. That's for sure.
Well, they're just
that sort of dropped a day after Buatsi left as well.
Yeah, they're basically saying that we are not confident that this marketplace is ready for a VOD platform solely.
Sure.
Via, because I mean, come on, let's get it right. I mean, I know that there's a section of the boxing audience that are purists that will only want to watch it in linear broadcasting, but the bulk of people now are living on Netflix and living on all these things. Yeah, sure. So they're used to this idea. They're used to the idea of being able to go into a space and choose the content they want to watch when they want to watch it. So the idea that they weren't getting the outcomes, because Josh talked about not getting the eyes on the prize, and Eddie was quite specific also about Lawrence Okoli, about how many tickets Lawrence Okoli sells.
Yeah.
But when I asked him, was it reasonable or unreasonable for these fighters to say, well, we kind of didn't sign with you, Eddie, to go to DAZN. That was your choice in the pursuit of your world domination and your opportunity for Matchroom to be this, billion-dollar business that Eddie may have views on. It didn't square the circle for us.
No.
What do you think that's fair on their part?
It's not fair on the fighter, that's for sure, because the fighter didn't sign up.
So then you're with the fighter now?
No, I'm just saying it's not fair on the fighter if he didn't sign up for that. You know, you've got the younger kids that are coming through or whatever. The Buatsi situation is, look, I understand that because the investment that's gone in and the fight that he was off, and he was going to get very good money from it.
The investment that Eddie says.
But Eddie said that, you know, so I understand it because Eddie's saying we want a little something back. If we give you 3 fights, and then obviously they're going to get their money back. So I understand that situation. I'm talking about the fighters in general. Like, you've got to be... The DAZN idea was, is brilliant. You got this app and everything else, that's great. But it's the hardcore boxing fans that are going to watch that. Only your hardcore boxing fans. With the Sky platform, you could be channel hopping and go, I've got Eubank on today. And they'll just, it's there. But what I'm saying is, even though you've got the Sky platform now, you've still got to be a hardcore fan to sign up for the DAZN because it is only boxing. Do you know what I mean? So,
but surely that's
the younger fighters that are coming through, and they're looking at it, they're going, and they've signed when they signed up, but Eddie was with Sky or whatever, and now all of a sudden they've gone to DAZN and it's game changed, and we're going to do this, and it hasn't materialised.
But it's
frustrating for the fighters.
Okay, do you believe? All right, let's just frame this question differently. Do you believe that Eddie Hearn is capable of turning fighters into superstars and to getting them money that they probably wouldn't get anywhere else at times?
On DAZN?
No, just full stop, Eddie. Eddie, as he has a promoter, do you believe he's a blue chip promoter?
100%.
Do you believe that he works the Oracle and gets people great fights?
Absolutely.
So then why wouldn't the fighters have a bit of belief in Eddie and say, hang on a second, you guys, we'll stick with you, Eddie, because we know you've got a proven track record. We know that you're capable of working the Oracle. Yeah. We know that you're capable of turning, snake oil into something valuable. Yeah. So why wouldn't they stick with him?
Right, I'll tell you why. Because a fighter's career is a very short-lived career. Very short-lived. Listen, my career spanned as a professional just over 3 years. And so like injuries happen, whatever. Like in my case,
but Josh Buatsi was offered a bar and a quarter.
Yeah, absolutely. That's big money, very big money. But like it's a bit more than that. The fighters recognise that they've got a life after boxing, and to become a star. Like you've got to hit it hard. You hit it hard.
But again, I would say that Eddie Hearn is the person potentially that's got that charisma and got that Stardust quality that does it. But clearly they don't think that. I don't
think it's Eddie. I think they believe in Eddie. And I don't think it's a personal thing against Eddie. I think it's that they just don't believe in DAZN, or by the time DAZN does kick off, if it does kick off, their careers will be gone. Finished, because it's going to take a bit of time, and that's what I believe.
Yeah, okay. One of the other, we sort of, by spending this conversation talking about Eddie, we sort of compound the view that he has in his own mind that he's the most important person to talk about. But notwithstanding that, this is the nature of the business that we're in, and the conversations that are happening with AJ re-emerging back on the scene are going to feature Matey Boy. So I make no apologies that we bring Eddie into this. It's not about getting ratings on the back of Eddie. It's about the subject matter is current, right? So he then talked about AJ and Fury, and obviously one of the reasons he was in, some people would say unkindly, that he wanted to make sure that the Jermaine Franklin Anthony Joshua tickets were sold and needed a bit of extra push. Other people would say he had to cover his convictions just to come in and debate a subject matter. But we've now got AJ emerging out of the shadows. Yeah, I think you're talking to him later on, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
And we've got this Franklin fight, and Eddie talked about a nervousness ahead of this fight. He had some slightly choice comments to make about Tyson Fury and his preparedness to take a fight with Usyk by weighting it in such a way that Usyk would never take it, and was being gobsmacked that he has taken it. Yeah. What did you make of Eddie's observations about Franklin and the idea that people were ridiculing that fight and so on and so forth?
I sort of make him right, as in I think that people are underestimating Franklin as a fighter. I think he proved that against Dillian Whyte. And a lot of people say, Dillian Whyte looked way past his best when he was in there. He looked slow, he looked sluggish. But the facts are that, Jermaine Franklin come over here with no credentials at all. Yeah, and he left with bundles of them. Because
is it they're underestimating Franklin? Or maybe they expect a better opponent for the 2 times heavyweight champion of the world?
I think, but you've got to allow Anthony Joshua, with coming off the back of 2 losses, going over to America, showing that he's still got the appetite because he's taken himself over to America, living in a place that's not particularly nice.
Dillian Whyte straight out of the gate. Dillian Whyte's fought Tyson Fury. I get it. Wouldn't it be Dillian Whyte? I think Dillian Whyte is clearly a lesser fighter than Anthony Joshua, right?
Oh yeah.
And Dillian Whyte's in not great nick, is he? He's got absolutely done up like a kipper by Tyson Fury and shown levels. He wasn't great against the aforementioned Jermaine Franklin. Yeah. Wouldn't everybody going, well, I tell you what, actually, if AJ comes back on a lesser fight, fights Dillian Whyte, who's shown where he is on the world stage now, he's shown where he is, right? Wouldn't that be the fight that everyone went, well, actually, there's no argument with that.
Yeah. I know that.
Isn't that why people are going, well, all right, mate?
I just think that, it is. But you've got to go further into look through the layers of it. Like, Dillian Whyte's one of those opponents. Because A beats B doesn't mean B's going to beat C, etc.
I understand that.
But Dillian Whyte is one of those guys that is stylistically always causes Anthony Joshua problems. Beat him as an amateur, had him in terrible trouble in the second round of their fight. He eventually turned it around and won in the 7th round. So they see it. They recognise that Dillian Whyte could be a problem. So they've chose what they feel is the next best one, because a lot of people felt Jermaine Franklin beat Dillian White. So they go, well, let's take Jermaine Franklin. Stylistically, actually, I think that suits Joshua. He's slower, he's standing in front, and, you know, he's there to be hit. And that might be ideal for Joshua, who's training with Derek James. And Derek James, his training techniques are, he likes aggression.
Aggressive, yeah.
And, like, so Joshua's gone out to the States. He's living, like, and apparently he's living in not particularly great conditions. He's living with a couple of guys, and he's gone back old school a little bit. Like, rather than absolutely, yeah. You know, and you understand, you probably wouldn't stand in a 4-star, would you? No, exactly. No. Anyway,
they tried to put me in a 4-star in Qatar. Yeah. It was like something with a Shining was filmed. Somewhere else.
I know. I saw your awful curtains, but that's another conversation. Right. So and have you seen? I'm not sure if you've been following Anthony Joshua on socials or whatever, but he's gone back old school training, chopping trees, all this stuff. So he's trying to. I think what he's trying to do is he's trying to rediscover himself, and we know that. So you've got to allow him, and I think Jermaine Franklin probably fits the bill, as in Joshua's not going to go and look for this guy. So he's going to be there. Derek James is going to try and bring that aggression out. Yeah. And so, you know, with all that in mind, you've got to allow Anthony Joshua to see if what Derek James is trying to install in him, he can deliver on. I think it's interesting that Eddie was nervous, because Eddie knows that Dillian White's always going to be dangerous.
Yeah, well, if you're fighting heavyweight fighters, they're all dangerous at some point.
Absolutely, but I think that's why we've got Franklin, and then I see Dillian White in June, and I see it's amazing how actually last time I interviewed Anthony Joshua, and I said to him, "Oh, you know, speaking, I've saw that you know the roadmap for you over the next 12 months is Franklin, Dillian White, and then we're looking at a Wilder or a Fury or something like that." And he said, "Where'd you hear that from? Where do you get that from?" And I said, "Well." Eddie's been talking about that, and he went, "Well, that ain't it at all, mate." So I don't know where Eddie's found that stuff from. So let's see where it goes.
Well, I mean, Eddie, I think Eddie knows, and I think we all know, and I think Anthony himself will know that this is a fight that he has to come out of looking dynamite. He has to get this guy out there in 3 or 4 rounds, put him on his back, and everyone goes, "That's fantastic, that's great. We got the eye of the tiger back, for want of a better expression. He's found his mojo," and then the questions will start again.
Is this make or break for AJ?
Absolutely. I mean, and obviously, I'm a promoter. I'm hyping the fight. But at the same time, I am nervous about the fight. He's coming off 2 defeats, albeit to Alexander Usyk. We saw emotionally the position that he was in after the last fight, because he wanted to win so badly. He's got a new trainer. He's taken himself to Dallas with a very, very small team to work his absolute socks off. You have to understand, like, sometimes the reason I speak so passionately about people, and the same with Conor Benn, is because I like them and I believe in them. They're people that are close to me. AJ particularly. Like, I take it very personally when AJ gets criticised, because when I look at the resume and I look at his ability to make fights and his willingness to make fights, it really gets on my wick, where he gets sort of overrun sometimes by fighters that want to speak on social media, which he never does.
Yeah. When
you just have to look at his resume. And Usyk, you know, I get people
saying... But his star has fallen. AJ's star has fallen dramatically.
Jim, he's lost 2 fights on the bounce. He's no longer a world champion. Of course his star has fallen.
Yeah, because, he's only Jermaine Franklin. And then he had a point, you know, hang on a second, you can't on one hand say Jermaine Franklin nearly beat Dillian White and then turn around and say it's only Jermaine Franklin. So you can't have it both ways.
Yeah, exactly.
But we will see. The most biggest intrigue has to be, do we see a recalibrated Anthony Joshua? Because the last time we saw him in a ring, I think he'd lost the plot.
Yeah.
With his outburst and coming back in and grabbing belts and throwing them out of the ring and telling everybody that he wasn't a 12-round fighter and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree.
But listen, all it is an interesting landscape. And of course, Eddie then went on to say about couldn't resist the opportunity, and he was afforded the opportunity to talk about Fury. Mm-hmm. And I think he thinks, I don't think he thinks, he said it. He said that he believes that Fury pushed the envelope at 70-30 on the basis of the split for the fight with Usyk, because he didn't think Usyk would take it. And he thinks Fury's had his bluff called. He then contradicted himself by saying, I don't think Fury's fighting to Usyk.
Yeah.
Or anyone.
Yeah.
What do you make to that scenario or assessment?
I just make to that Fury's looking at it and he's going, listen, this is my value, this is my worth. You know, forget that it's the undisputed title and everything else. I feel that I'm worth 70%. I don't think Fury really gives a shit whether whoever he's fighting. I think he'll fight anyone. I truly believe that. I truly believe that. And I just think he's looked at it and gone, this is my value. Yeah. Because 30% of what we're going to get, the split is, and whatever that is, I'm not sure what it is, but it'll be in the tens of millions. It's going to be a lot of money. And he's looking at it going, Usyk, do you want that or not? This is what's on the table for you. Do you want it or not? And Usyk wants that undisputed. He wants to, you know, it's all about modern eras, legacies and all that. And I think that Usyk took it. I think Fury Fury's probably surprised. Fury would have probably gone in. He would have probably settled at 60-40 or something like that. There was probably more. There was
I don't know.
probably more legs there. But what I'm saying is that I think that yes, he may have been surprised, but I still think that fight happens. I think we're meant to be hearing that. This goes out on Wednesday. I think we're meant to be hearing that actually. So yeah.
Well, listen, that was the conversation that myself and Eddie Hearn had this morning. And yes, Eddie, you're a big draw. We've talked about you again. But let's move on.
Yeah.
Right, that's it for Talk Boxing episode number 17. Don't forget to keep liking and subscribing. Keep watching the videos. If you want to see the full interview with Eddie Hearn, come and watch it on this channel. For myself and Spencer, we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Don't forget, of course, to watch the Talk Boxing Q&A on Sunday.